Hi, and welcome to the Chasing Light podcast, where we talk with photographers and cinematographers about the craft and life creating images. Today, I'm honored to talk with one of America's most celebrated landscape photographers. Jack Dykinga is a Pulitzer Prize winning photojournalist whose images capture not just the land, but the spirit of the places he photographs. His career spans decades of storytelling, from the fast-paced world of Chicago newspapers to the timeless beauty of the desert Southwest. Jack's work has graced the pages of National Geographic and Arizona Highways, and his books like Frog Mountain Blues, Stone Canyons of the Colorado Plateau, and Capture the Magic have become touchstones for nature and conservation photography. His photographs have hung beside those of Ansel Adams, and his voice has been central to conservation efforts around the globe through the International League of Conservation Photographers. In recognition of his lifelong contributions, Jack has received the North American Nature Photography Association's Lifetime Achievement Award, NANPA's Fellow Distinction, and in 2025, he was inducted into the Arizona HighwaysvMagazine Hall of Fame. From burrowing owls on plains to the subtle drama of Arizona's deserts, Jack Dykinga's work is infused with gratitude, empathy, and an eye that connects the heart to the land. Today, we'll explore his remarkable journey, the stories behind his images, and what it truly means to see the world through the lens of light. Jack, thank you for coming on the Chasing Light podcast and discussing your distinguished career as both a photojournalist and professional nature and landscape photographer. I really, really appreciate you coming on here.
It's my pleasure, and it's really great meeting you.
Great meeting you too. Yes, I mean, we briefly met on the Death Valley workshop. You came by briefly
Right.
that I was doing with Jerry Dodrill and Todd Pickering. It was, we were in the middle of our review sessions, and it was great to have you there. And I know some people there. You had done some workshops with you and knew you. So, and it was funny as we were driving around there. They were always looking for your van, because you were there at the same time. So
yeah,
I think we passed it a few times.
It actually was a really good shoot for me because I was watching it. That's why I just made a cameo appearance, but there was a great storm system moving in. So I was out on the flats and ended up getting a couple of really nice images, I think. But
yeah, it was great. It like didn't rain in the valley, but like all around the valley. It was
Virgo clouds everywhere.
Yeah, it was really, really cool. So Jack, for listeners who might not know your story, can you take us back to your early days as a photojournalist and what first drew you to photography and what those early assignments were like?
Well, let me go further back than that.
Okay, great.
When I was in high school, I had the great honor to win an award from the Look magazine photo contest, which the legendary Arthur Rothstein was one of the judges. So that sort of put a stamp on me, and it made me think of what's possible. Fast forward many years, I was shooting celebrities at O'Hare Airport with a guy he made a living circulating celebrity photos to airlines that coincidentally had a tail fin of American Airlines in the background.
Oh, wow.
So it was like it was basically PR. But my work became disseminated to the local 4 newspapers. And in the short order, I was able to see my work copied again in the local papers. So that was a good start. Not the start you'd expect, but that was the day of press photographers, just short of the fedora with the press thing on it. You probably read some of the articles about I was an agent of change for that period.
Yeah. I mean, you were photographing. Tell us some of the different kinds of things you were photographing during the time.
Well, Chicago was a very competitive 4-newspaper town. Many of almost all the papers were really very graphic centered. And so there was, some of the papers had a full back page of just photographs. Mine didn't. But you got to see firsthand the news of the day, but you were doing it in a very competitive manner. So it was like a photo contest every day, and the opposition newspapers had some incredibly talented people. And so I always tell people that it's like producing a book every day. You sort of take newspapers for granted, but when I used to get an intern, I would walk him down and watch the presses roll. Because you'd have to mark up the pages and then make the plates and then put them on the presses and then watch it spin. But
Sure.
Now we sort of take that for granted, being in the electronic media. But it was really a magical time.
Yeah, I got to do a little bit of printing in high school, so I do know we had a Heidelberg press, which was very rare for a high school, and so I had to make plates and I had to put them on and do actually in our case 4-color at times, and I printed the school newspaper and stuff like that. But I mean, you got to see some amazing stuff. I mean, you were right in the middle of a lot of the civil rights and urban protests, right, that were going on.
I mean, I covered
during that time.
Of course, Martin Luther King and SNCC and CORE and all the associated marches. And there was a particular time when minority people were given these really high interest loans, and it ended up being called the Contract Buyers League protests. And they got pretty violent on the south side of Chicago. But on a given day, you just didn't know what was going to be coming your way. And in a way, it's exciting. But as you get older in the business, you realize that there are more long-term things and long-term effects.
Yeah. Because you were also shooting other things, like just the different neighborhoods, right, in Chicago, and the plight of people's struggles and that type of thing.
Well, more and more, that's kind of what I gravitated to, because it wasn't, visual impact in print. It was ongoing, and you could actually see the photography could make a difference. And of course, covering mental institutions housing mentally disabled people was very big for me.
Yeah, I mean, you won the Pulitzer Prize in 1971.
That's right.
For feature photography, which was, what was happening in your life at that moment, and did that change the way you saw your work? I mean, you won the award for your Illinois State Mental Hospital at Dixon, right? Illinois,
Lincoln
the coverage that you did during that time.
Two places, Lincoln and Dixon. And,
gotcha. Okay.
It was a very long series that the Chicago Sun-Times produced that won the Kennedy Award for the writers, and it got me the Pulitzer for the photos. But it was, it was a clear example of what you could do in journalism. And we did it, of course, not as an expose per se, but we had a contact within the parents of the people in the institution. They were a very strong parent group, and they told us we needed to look at this. And I say we, the whole newspaper. So they sent down 2 reporters, one embedded in the staff, and one walked in with me. And we went in with the administrator's approval. And the cause for all this was the governor was cutting funding to the hospitals, and they were already abysmal. So everybody was very concerned. But, luckily, I mean, I had an open invitation from the administration of the hospitals. Was
that the first time they had ever let somebody in the hospital to photograph?
I don't know. That's a good question. Okay. I really don't know. But I did have, and some funny things happened. Of course, a little kid with Down syndrome was my guide. And he was fascinated by my cameras, and his hands had excrement all over him, so I was a little concerned.
Wow. Yeah.
But it was, it was one of those extremely moving things that you couldn't walk in there. Here I am, a white bread kid from the suburbs of Chicago, getting smacked with reality and a total bombardment of smell, touch, visuals. It was, I can almost go right back to it right now.
I read something about it took you like an hour and a half before you even thought about picking up your camera,
Yeah,
just
yeah,
taking
exactly.
it all in, right? Like
Yeah,
what was
that's
going on
sort of
there.
interesting because that's kind of what I do all the time. Um, sometimes you just react. I mean, I sent you a picture called Sisterhood, but it's sometimes you just react and shoot. But something less important, you really are trying to just find out what the context is, what's normal.
Yeah.
It's also awful to me that I just didn't know what normal was. I was looking at conditions that were just abysmal, and they were good
Wow.
by comparison.
So, this Pulitzer Prize winning work arose from obviously these deeply human stories. And did living and working in a city as diverse and dynamic as Chicago teach lessons in visual empathy that carried into later images in nature photography for you? Or
Yeah, well, I mean, I've made a very large leap in my journey
yeah.
from being brought up as a conservative Republican in the suburbs of Chicago to going in and covering civil rights and having my eyes banged open, really, literally. It was like something smacked into me. And then you start, members of the press were beat up by the police sometimes. And so it was sort of a rude awakening. You can't go through that and not have it affect you.
Yeah, no, I
And if you
imagine.
did, then you're not worth a damn, really.
And this is I didn't put this in my questions, but it's coming. I have my daughter likes to do some. I don't know if it's per se photojournalism, but she also has a friend who's doing some really nice work. But one of the teachers mentioned to him like the difference between being an observer and looking and observing what's going on versus sort of being in the what's going on. And there's a fine line there, right, between being that observer and sort of interjecting yourself. And that's a hard line, isn't it? Because you're trying to
Yeah,
get shots and you're trying to get in the middle of what's going on.
yeah.
um, but not becoming the story yourself is a hard thing sometimes, right?
Yeah, I mean it's and it carries over to wildlife and nature photography as well. But sometimes you want to intervene instead of just watch, and that you have that need. Um, Sometimes you do. I'll say that, but for the most part, I try to stay apart and honor the creed that was drummed in my head by all the silverbacks in the newsroom.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I mean, it was it's easier said than done. If you're a feeling empathetic person, you're going to feel what the person's feeling.
Yeah. And yeah, it's hard not to say to some cop, "What are you doing?" Right? What do or something like that.
Well, yeah. Well, I was with a reporter once on the covering an American Nazi Party rally, and the reporter is carrying a little notepad, and a pencil, and I'm
Hmm.
going down the street with three cameras around my neck, and he started to lecture the mob,
Mm.
and of course he evaporates into the crowd, and they say, "Get the cameraman." So
Yeah.
what I learned then was you got to be able to run fast. So I ran about 3 blocks, cameras like us banging into each other. But yeah, it's that's exactly what happened. I mean, he just got he made a moral decision.
Yeah. And you were shooting Leicas back then, huh?
Both one, a couple of each. I
Wow,
had
nice.
the traditional well-equipped photographer had a couple wide angle Leicas and a short and longer telephoto on Nikons. That was on each shoulder, but and nowadays it gets even more complicated, or it did get complicated when we start shooting color film. But I
Yeah.
keep thinking now that it's so much easier.
Yeah, for sure, right?
You
And
just think about it, it's there.
yeah. And I mean, we can get into that transition.
Yeah,
I know a lot of traditional photographers, like yourself who shot film. It was a big step, right, to go from film to digital.
Well, yeah, I mean, I went from black and white first,
Yeah.
and there was a very good comfort zone with. I mean, I could look at any lighting situation and tell you what a like exposure would be with Tri-X, and so I never bothered with metering anything. Just I knew it, and then color, and then digital, and then I went. Of course, in there is also 4x5, which is another diversion on my on my epic journey. It's like, why try one camera? Try them all.
Yeah, I mean, I know, I mean, especially for landscape, a lot of people shot 4x5 for many, many years, right?
Yeah,
Just
yeah,
because
still do.
they wanted the higher quality images
Well,
and such.
perspective correction too.
Yeah, yeah. So at some point you made a shift from the newsroom to nature and conservation photography. Can you tell us what was that turning point? Was it a trip? Was it an image? Was it something gradual? Like how did that come about for you?
Well, we're missing a step here because
Okay.
when I was shooting photojournalism in Chicago, um, I actually wanted to get into management because that's what you're supposed to do. And so I went to Tucson and became the photo director of the Arizona Daily Star. So I was in the editing end of it, and I was in the editing end of it at the Tribune after I went to the Sun-Times. I went from the Tribune to the Sun-Times, back to the Tribune, and then to the Arizona Daily Star. But when I came to Tucson, I was laying out pages and doing a little of the graphics and stuff like that. So it's the neat thing about photography. It's a great genre. You can bounce around within that umbrella and still be doing totally different things and exciting things. Except at some point, I want to go out and shoot again.
Yeah, I was going to say, did you miss shooting? Obviously, being in
Well,
that.
I should also say that in Chicago, I did do an assignment at the Tribune uh, covering a guy's ascent of Mount Rainier. So I joined him and went through Rainier Mountaineering School in I think 1975, and that was about a year before I came to Tucson. So by the time I got to Tucson, I was an outdoorsy granola guy. At least it was rolling around in the back of my head. I mean, I'd been to the mountain literally,
Yeah, yeah,
and once you've climbed above the clouds and looked at the mountain ranges fading off in the distance, you're kind of hooked.
yeah,
And then I started realizing that nature, I use it in a general sense, is being threatened. But in so many ways. Corporate interests want to mine, log, develop, put Trump hotels. But
yeah.
it's always under threat, and it's kind of like we live in a country that's just unique in the fact that we've got this wild land out there, which is it's just an amazing thing. Now it's evolved. So that plus climate change sort of shoved me towards nature and wildlife.
And that was the big thing. There wasn't a
Again, it's
specific
not. It
trip
wasn't
or
like a switch flipped. It was just
yeah,
watching things over time, and that's the problem with climate change is that uh, it's like the frog in the boiling pot of water. You don't realize it's incremental changes, and so in a lot of ways, I feel like I'm documenting things at a certain point in time. And I have been going out and photographing, dying things too, like the Sonoran Desert is really getting hammered by the drought.
mm,
So that's another other aspect. But it's sort of like the journalistic background is still there, and sometimes it rears its ugly head and makes you not just look at pretty pictures, but look at a reason and a narrative.
and was it just like, okay, I'm stopping being a photojournalist and I'm going to go do
No,
this, or
I
just
actually,
you kind of overlap during your career doing both, kind
when
of.
I quit the newspaper in Tucson, I was stringing for Newsweek, Time, and U.S. News. And then a friend of mine, a really dear friend of mine, died of brain cancer. And they asked me to document his last time on Earth. So I ended up going back to photograph this transition of his life. And he's always been the one that's told me, when are you going to stop doing this nature bullshit? Get back to journalism. So anyway, I ended up photographing him. And it was gratifying. I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
Tears come.
So, I'm sorry, go ahead. Say that again.
The tears keep coming.
Yeah. Yeah. How did your mindset and creative process change when you moved from covering, breaking news to chasing light in wild landscapes? I mean,
I hate to really be so, there's no secret sauce. I think sometimes you're born with certain tendencies. Being dyslexic and left-handed has a lot to do with it.
Yay, lefties.
I can't turn the movie off. When I look out, I'm seeing compositions all the time, and it's sort of innate. I read about. I think maybe you said something like somebody said credit David Minch for this near to far thing. Well, as a photojournalist, we were doing near to far all the time.
Yeah.
With a Leica and a 21 millimeter lens. So it was not a patentable thing. It was just a tool you used for that job. And of course, it became sort of his signature, which is good. There's so much in photography that's, you've got all this set of tools, and you adapt those tools for the problem at hand. And if you look at any assignment, it boils down to being a problem that you're solving graphically. And so I wish I could tell you I really worked at it, but I don't. It sometimes just jumps right in the Finder.
Yeah. I think, it's funny. I was talking to Art Wolf a couple of weeks back, and he was saying, he's done well more than his 10,000 hours. It just like inherently comes, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's muscle memory at some point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So your first feature for Arizona Highways was Ramsey Canyon, I believe, right? A visit to an unspoiled land in November 1982.
Yeah, it's another funny story. It's
yeah.
There was a legendary managing editor named Wesley Holden, and Wes, I knew him, and I went down to pitch my idea of my backcountry tours business. I was ahead of my time.
Yeah.
So I went down to pitch the idea, and he said, "Well, that's good, that's fine, but why don't you consider going down to Ramsey Canyon? There's this writer there named Bowden. Why don't you meet him and see what you can come up with?" So, make a long story short, we've done 4 or 5 books together, and countless articles. He died a couple of years ago, but it was a long association with a very good writer.
Yeah, you and Charles were very good friends, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. How did that pairing shape both the visual and narrative style of your work in the magazine? I mean,
well, I think it shaped it a lot. I mean, it shaped his as well. I always tell the story about we did one story about surviving in the desert. We were doing some walk across the desert, as we often did, and Chuck was stooped over. He thought like a photographer. He was stooped over, writing down the name of the tire, and it turned out it was a Lifesaver tire. it was poetic, but that sort of visual sensitivity on his part was great. And so if we did a story and the images were strong, and the story was, he would cut the story, and not many writers would do that. And conversely, I would cut out photographs to run the story longer. So we had this kind of trust. And so it did affect both of us.
Yeah.
I think trust is the key.
Yeah. How many, you probably don't even, do you know how many articles and pieces you guys did for Arizona Highways?
Yeah. Over 20 at least.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard. And there was other publications as well.
Yeah. I mean, you've been doing stuff for Arizona Highways, what, since 1982, right? And then you did some stuff fairly recently too. So, like, I think this past April, uh,
Pretty much every issue.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I remember looking through those magazines and seeing your stuff, and
Well, it's sort of
uh,
interesting because I'm blessed to be in a profession that's celebrates wisdom, for lack of
yeah,
a better word, but it's also an inventory of the state, knowing it very well.
yeah. I mean, I'll be really honest. One of the reasons why I ended up going to Arizona State, besides the fact that it was a great party school, was seeing all those images
Uh,
in the Arizona Highways magazine, and just thinking like, hey, I can go around to all these places, while I was in school, and I loved Sedona and the northern part, and I would try to get up there, every third week if I could.
yeah.
Um,
Well,
didn't get as often down to Tucson, but I did get there once in a while.
when I was in Chicago, I remember distinctly reading an article about, I think it was Gary Brash in Backpacker magazine or something like that. But and then he talked about a guy named Phil Hyde, who I was fortunate enough to really get to know. But back in Chicago, I would pour over maps, and I looked at this section of Arizona along the Mexican border, and there was like nothing, no roads. And I just thought right away, I got to go there.
Right, yeah.
So like you,
Obviously,
I mean, I was drawn to the maps and the vacant country.
the road less traveled.
Well, it's sort of interesting because again, it's all about sensibilities. But when you're living in an urban environment, everything's based in is human centered, and if you live out here, you realize there's a lot going on in nature, in places without any humans, and so you get an appreciation of that.
Yeah.
The longer you're in the business, the more you know about it. We would in Chicago, we would talk about landscape photography as placemat photography. Talk
That's
about
funny.
it as
Yeah.
derisive as you could get. But when
Uh,
you get out here, you realize, geez, there's a lot going on, a lot of
yeah.
texture, a lot of light, and then it's a whole different ball game when you start talking about the way the light sweeps across the land.
Yeah, you sent me a photo just the other day that you said, was that like right outside your house? The one with the rainbow and the
Oh, no, I was down in the grasslands.
Oh, you were. Okay.
That's down toward the Mexican border, but it's the high Sonoran Desert area. It's also where I'm shooting the prairie dogs.
Gotcha. Okay.
So it's
Yeah, it was beautiful. Just a
no, it's a
great
stunning
picture.
place. I mean, it's
Yeah.
you talk about big sky. It's just cloudscapes everywhere.
Yeah.
But
Um,
that's why sometimes I'm just so lucky to be here.
yeah.
In a lot
And
of ways.
and during the monsoon season, it's kind of nice too. You get those big clouds, right?
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
and yeah, and,
Right.
and rain squalls and stuff like that are really cool to see
They're getting all
and
the
make
rain that we
amazing
should be
backgrounds.
getting. So that's
Yeah. This past April, you were introduced into the Arizona Highways Hall of Fame.
yeah.
Um, how did that feel after all those years?
Well, it's sort of it's very gratifying. First of all, it sort of was interesting. David mentioned I both were inducted. David and I taught photo workshops together for about 10 years, and we had a little bit of a falling out for a while. I got to see him there, and we had a really great time together. It was good on a lot of levels, but knowing that you're part of history basically is kind of amazing, really, if you think about this little kid from suburban Chicago.
Yeah, I followed both of your guys' work,
Yeah.
almost my entire
But we
life.
always
And
called him King David, so that was
yeah, I mean, I for a while became fairly close with him. Once in a blue moon, he would come out to California and he'd say, "Hey, I'm on the 395. Do you want to meet me up somewhere?" And I would
right,
kind of drop everything and try to go up there.
right.
I did a few workshops with him, um, but he was always very kind and generous with his
Yeah,
time.
he
So,
is. Yeah.
um, you had such an impact on the state and so many other photographers, including me. When you do workshops and how does that feel when you have people coming up to you and, you know, uh,
Well, it's a mixed bag.
yeah, I'm sure.
When you're actually teaching, it's work. There's just no other way to say it. And so, I really believe in leading by example and photographing things and showing them during the critiques. And some people are incensed by that. And not many, though. Not many. I'd say most people realize what's going on by the second day for sure. But there was again a very funny situation in Death Valley where somebody said, "I don't understand why you don't come over and look through my camera." And one of the fellow students stood up and said, "Because you're standing in a bad place." I was like, I didn't have to say a word, but I mean, there is some truth to if a professional is standing over here, you might want to, see that viewpoint.
Yeah,
especially
absolutely.
if you're in the workshop and paying good money to learn something. But
yeah
so I guess maybe I've met so many really, really great people, and dare I say, talented photographers. And then there's another class that sometimes it just takes one every 10 years to ruin it for you, and antagonistic and having arguments with other people in the workshop. And at some point in life, you just say, well, I want to be a photographer again.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I've got, this bucket list of things I need to work on. And I'm doing it right now.
That's great. That was going to be one of my questions is, I mean, obviously there are some people who do workshops because they like teaching people and,
Right.
and whatnot. Some people are doing it because they need money. It's a combination of both, but I guess at this point in your career, like you just said, it's more about you doing, the things that are on your bucket list or that you want to do. Right.
I mean,
So,
I'm running out of time.
yeah.
I mean, I won't beat around the bush, but there's certain things I want to do. There's certain things, experiences that enrich my soul, and a lot of that has to do with bird photography. Like, I can't wait for the fall to see the sandhill cranes come back. I mean, that's like, you're alive.
Yeah.
It's like this outburst of energy and life force. That's it's a celebration. So those kind of moments, you just got to grab them.
Yeah, and I'm going to be showing you, those photos that you sent and that I'm showing probably right now are really spectacular. Some of the ones you have, and I love you're playing with shutter speed on some of them, like all these birds in flight and stuff like that are really, really beautiful. Just amazing.
Well, you realize that there's infinite number of options to do things, and again, it goes back to the old solving the problem and having a box of tools, and that's really what it's about. I mean, it's like I listen to some people really painting a vivid picture of the soul enrichment, and it's like,
right.
It gets done at doing a job, showing up for work. Don't be late for work, and I mean, I don't mean that it doesn't affect me, because it, like I said, some days even now I won't photograph. I'll just sit there and watch.
Yeah,
and it's a great.
And why do you do that? Is it just you want to learn about their
that's
patterns and behaviors and that type of thing, or you're just not in the mood kind of thing?
No, I think sometimes if you photograph something, so many times, you're looking for a specific animal behavior, for instance, or a certain reaction. So it's like the first day on a shoot, you shoot a lot. The second day, a little bit less. And then months later, you're shooting one or two. So you go from a shotgun approach to a rifle. So I'm looking for, a certain thing, usually. If a coyote comes by and he's going to try to attack a bird, I'm looking for that for sure. or
Yeah,
if the
absolutely.
bird's flying across the full moon, you know, that's a very much of a hard shot to get because they're moving fast. You're shooting a low light with a 1200 millimeter lens. A lot of problems to solve in that one. But yeah,
Yeah,
I'm getting very picky now.
as you should. We've
Well,
covered so much.
that happens to be for birds, but for landscape, it's either there or it's not there. And I for a long time I was pretty good at making things happen, and but as I get older, now it's realizing that if you wait long enough, it'll come, and it does. And that's why I do it.
Yeah, I think that's experience
Well,
as
it's
well,
part of the joy, though, of knowing that patience is rewarded for one thing, but also a knowledge of the place. Speaking for the earth, I don't want to be presumptuous, but you are in a way. You're sort of exhibiting the place on a national stage or a worldwide stage. So it's important.
Yeah. So when you're standing in front of that scene, um, how do you balance like the technical side of things, which of course are aperture, shutter speed, composition, blah blah blah, with the artistic side of interpreting, what you're feeling in that moment. Um, and this may go back to what Art said, where it's just inherent, but do you think about any of that?
Sure, you do. I mean, I think Art's being a little too glib about that, actually. But
Okay.
there's certain limitations if the light's low or if the wind is blowing, and with wildlife, you have a general parameters, for high speed photography, and the cameras are so good, it's pretty hard to mess up too much. Too much.
Yeah.
The flip side of that is the cameras get better and higher resolution, like the Fuji 100 megapixels. Every little wart, every mistake you made is right there, and it's screaming at you, and it's screaming at the reader or the viewer. So you really have to pay attention to details, and like wind, for instance, for landscape photography. That's people say you can stack focus on something. Well, if you can stack focus it, and if the wind's blowing, you're going to have a stuttered,
Yeah, doesn't
image
matter
in the
at that
foreground.
point.
You learn. Well, I've got to stop down a certain amount. When is diffraction going to kick in? What can I deal with? What can I sharpen it better in post? So all that's going through my mind is I'm trying to solve that particular problem. In fact, the shot that I sent you, the rainbow, was something I would normally do with a stack focus. Mm-hmm. But the wind was ripping through there, as you always get with a monsoon storm. You know that. Mm-hmm. So I was stuck with either somewhere between 18 and f18 and 22, trying to get enough to get the infinity point. So yeah,
it looked great. It worked.
It's sort of like when I taught workshops, I always say that you've got the scale here, artist over here, and you've got a mechanic over here, and basically you're on this continuum. If you're if you do it right, then you've got all the technical part handled, and if you, then it gives you a little bit of freedom to look at art and try to blend that into a composition, and then there's light and all kinds of things. But I think what Art was saying is that it comes at you all at once, and you react. And because of your experience, the reaction time is much quicker the older you get. It sounds weird.
Can you walk us through the story behind one of your favorite or most challenging shots?
Why don't we do a couple?
I stumped you.
No, I mean, I mentioned the sisterhood shot because that's kind of fun. It's a black and white, and it was back in my journalistic days. But I was, driving down Michigan Avenue. This is the counterpoint, and I had a Leica with a 90 millimeter Elmar lens on my seat next to me, and I watched this sign that said spray painted sisterhood on a bench. I watched it for maybe weeks, and finally I'm going down the street, and it's right near the Hilton Hotel. And I see these two little ladies giggling on the bench. So I locked my brakes in the middle of Michigan Avenue, jumped out, wrapped off about 3 or 4 frames, and cabs were just going bonkers. And I got the shot. And that's the outlier, the decisive moment. And you just go for it. And it was technically all kinds of, it was fraught with high ISO and big blow up and everything else, but it was a great moment. So the moment spoke volumes. And
that's a beautiful shot.
And then the flip side of that is the one of the curlicue route in the Colorado Plateau with the red rock. It's the one that was named as one of the decisive or famous wildlife nature photos. That one, I had gone to the place again. I'd been to the area called the Wave. This is way before it became popular. Now it's on. Everybody posts a GPS on it, which is another terrible thing. But anyway,
well, it's very hard to get in there still. I mean, they do restrict it, which is great.
Yeah, well, they have to. I mean, it's. But when back in my day, I would go in there, and it was not an easy hike, not a long hike, not a short hike, but with a bunch of 4x5 gear, it was not something you do every 2 days or every day.
Nice schlep.
So I did it over a period of months, maybe, and each time I went back there, it wasn't quite right. And I was meeting with a publisher up in Salt Lake City. And so I thought, well, I'm going to go back through that area on the way home. I'll give it one more try. And it was following a rainstorm. And so the pool was full, and there was this curlicue root there. And it's just like, it was that anchor point for your eye. So, I mean, it's just like, as I said, sometimes it just jumps into the camera. Yeah. And that composition did. And, with the water as a reflection pool, which never happens. This never happens. And if water in the pool is there, hardly ever happens. So if all the conditions are right and you've watched something for a long period of time, sometimes you get it. And so that it all came together. But, I can. I mean,
that. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you.
I was just going to say that speaks to me in the sense that, like, the fact that you stop, as you're driving back, you're like, I'm going to stop and I'm going to check it out again. There's a lot of photographers that just, they give up, right? Or they don't go back, or they don't make the effort to go to, and that's one of the things that I find, about a lot of landscape and nature photography, the inquisitiveness, the willingness to, like, I'm not going to give up. I'm going to keep going back to this place until I either get that shot that I really want, or see it in a different time. And that, to me, is part of what separates someone and their photography is that willingness and ableness to go do that.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. I mean, if I was going to say, you talk about all the assets of a photographer, the number one thing is curiosity, and then dogged persistence, and then you got another skill set of that's again artistic or mechanical, and but the curiosity is what gets the ball rolling. What if? Why did this happen? And what's the anomaly I'm looking at here? How do I tell that in a story? All important.
It's just a lot of dedication too, to keep going back. And,
well, a long time ago, I bought a camper, I'm trying to think, probably back in the early 80s, maybe around 1980 or so. I had you have to live there.
Yeah.
Essentially, because, if you go in a workshop there, you're being whisked into the prime situation. It's been scouted. But if you're out there for the first time in a new area, you're going to live there, and you're going to watch it through different seasons and different moods with the weather. Yeah, I mean, there's no shortcuts to doing the work.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many people that go off and they just basically knock off pictures that have been made throughout the national parks forever. If I see one more picture of a Kodiak bear with its mouth open and a trout or a salmon going, it's like, what I'm saying? There's these visual touchstones that people, they're just tickled that they've got it and they put it up on Facebook. But it's like, what have you seen?
Right.
What's in your bag? What's in your wallet?
Yeah.
But
no, absolutely.
But it's it's sort of interesting that I think the average person in their daily life walks by photographs all the time, but they've got this one that they've seen published somewhere, and so they get tunnel vision, and it's really a good thing to just sort of pull back and say, what am I really doing here? And I think through all my different transitions, I think I've done that a number of times. Sometimes, I'm guilty of it. I'll go out looking for a specific shot and step right over the best thing in my life. It's like, I always talk about, you go off with this idea, I have to hike all across the desert, and then I come back and right 10 feet from my hubcap. This is the best image ever. And it's happened a lot of times. And I think that's a good lesson.
Yeah. I think part of the whole thing is people being able to see, right? Just step back from your camera and just kind of take a moment to see what's around you. I did a workshop a year ago, and it was up in Oregon, and it was in the trees, in the forest, and somebody said, look down. You know what I mean? Like, look at what's at your feet. There's all these amazing plants and
it sounds like Jerry. It sounds like Dodrell.
Yeah, it was with Jerry and Justin actually at that point. And it was literally like, stop looking at trees, look down at plants and some other things.
Again, one of the disciplines that you get as a journalist is developing. I was from a time when we did a thing called a picture story. Basically, a beginning, middle, and ending. And so, part of the thing that goes through your head, coming from that background, is the layout. So you always think about an overview in detail shots, and it got to the point where it's like there's. If you judge these contests, you would see that there'd be an overview, there'd be a close-up of some guy's hands. And it was like, there's like a formula. People do this all the time.
Yeah.
But the point is, the place, whatever it is, or the person or whatever, speaks to you. And how you interpret it is totally up to you.
Yeah.
You can apply, with broad brushes, a certain formula, but it doesn't necessarily hold up all the time. So the story may not be what's at your feet. The story may be the fog and the rays coming through the trees.
Yeah.
But if you're doing it as a picture story, sort of the discipline is cover your bases. You don't want to get back and have the publisher or the editor say, why didn't you get this? And so that's always, again, in the back of my head. Because, when I was shooting for the newspaper, the Sun-Times particularly, some of the photojournalists I was competing against, it was no big deal for somebody to win Photographer of the Year. There was several in that same space. And so you learn from your competition many times over.
And it's good you had that competition because it was pushing you, right?
Well, I was fortunate. It was just really a blessing.
Yeah. You were talking about storytelling, and your roots are a lot in storytelling, and how does that narrative instinct still influence the way you approach your landscape work or your
it's almost it's total. It's like the shot you were just talking about with the rainbow in the background and the monsoon storm. I'm looking for something to anchor the image, and fortune smiled on me, and I found the one flowering yucca.
Yeah.
And it wasn't blowing too much. So I basically bolted down next to that yucca and watched the storm ebb and flow. And so my whole idea was to show, the monsoons over the grasslands and these great storms, but also you need an anchor in the foreground. The benefactor of that rain was that yucca.
Yeah.
So in a sense, it's telling a story.
Do you think every image should say something, or is there room for just the pure beauty, without a particular message or anything? Is it?
It occasionally happens, and I would be more dogmatic in the back. In the past, I would always say a photograph has to have a purpose, a reason for being. I can think of several just pure design images that come to mind, but they were part of a book project or a magazine article. So they were a component. And it turns out, it's like you shoot as a professional many images over a month period of time. And out of that bunch, say maybe 5 or 6 of them rise to the level of approaching art. And maybe you can consider making a print. So they're not all equal, but they're all saleable. That whole month of shooting. But when you sort of pluck your magic wand out and say this is art, it's pretty presumptuous, first off.
Yeah.
But because it's always decided by the future generations. But Phil Hyde told me once that when he makes a print, when he decides to print something, he would pin it up on the wall and just live with it for a month, and decides if he's going to go into a print run. And so I think I'm kind of dancing around your question, but yes, I think a couple of the images. Well, the one behind me, for instance, was just for its own sake. I mean, the composition of that Indian paintbrush was just. It was a drive-by shooting. I was going through this park and I saw that scene and I just was like, oh my God. And I leaped out, set up my 4x5 as fast as I could, not knowing that was a marshy area and was filled with biting flies. And I had shorts on. So I'm dancing around trying to get the photograph before the sun comes over the ridge line. And luckily I managed to shoot 4 or 5 frames. But yeah, and I think maybe the other one next to it, both of those were part of a book project, but in a broad sense. And by that, I mean, I'll look at a geographic area. I did a book on the Mojave Desert, on the Sonoran Desert, one of the Great Basin. Those were all, that gets you out of the wood, gets you out in the country. You're not going to get anything by thinking about stuff.
Yeah.
You pretty much have to be there.
Can you remember a time in the field when you consciously decided not to press the shutter? I mean, we just were talking about this a little bit.
Lots of times.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can think of wildlife scenes where I call them hamburger shots when you're watching a wildebeest getting ripped apart by a variety of lions. There's a certain number of people are really pretty ghoulish about that. It's like, it's almost a Native American sacred thing when they talk about the way an animal dies and how it's being killed. The breath goes on and all that. I mean, there's something to that, but those are sort of private moments. I feel like a voyeur.
Oh.
So yeah, particularly in wildlife, certainly birds of prey are pretty. They don't call them raptors for nothing.
Yeah.
Rapacious. But there's been a number of times where I didn't do it. But, mostly with landscape, it has to do with the light or the wind blowing, or I've got a better shot at home.
Yeah.
And that's actually, I should say that's a flaw. When you start thinking I've got a better one before, then you cease being hungry. And but you do it. And you did it more in the days when it was $5 a shot with film.
Sure.
The 4x5,
Uh,
it was pretty expensive.
yeah. Now it's just cheap. It's just
Yeah,
your willingness to pull over or do whatever, right, and
yeah,
shoot the shot.
yeah. I mean, I think
Um,
about it. I was coming back from New Zealand.
I love New Zealand.
I had, I think, 20 boxes of quick loads to be processed. And I was trying to go through the airport without getting an x-ray. And I had a huge argument. And now, I would go there with several cards, that you could put in a purse. But before it was, a giant box of stuff that had to go. And 4x5s were notorious for being vulnerable to x-rays, especially if they didn't
Yeah.
x-ray. But
Yeah, that must have been fun to argue with them and try to get them to.
yeah, actually, David mentioned I had a big argument down in Argentina one time. David walks in with this big, plastic bag full of cassettes and film.
Right.
Yeah, no way, no way.
Wow. So, I'm going to get a little personal here. Reflecting on, you've had a double lung transplant, right? And
Yeah,
reflecting on that,
yes.
I mean, it's kind of a little bit of a silly question, but did that profound experience shift the way that you observe or interpret,
Made the sands go a little
your
faster
work?
down the hourglass.
Yeah. Did it change the types of things that you wanted to photograph or what?
No,
No. Okay.
it let me know that time is precious. I don't know if you know that, Justin is involved a little bit. My lungs really tanked on a river trip down the Colorado. They gave up the ghost. So he ended up driving me from Flagstaff to the hospital where I thought I was going to just get a shot and a pat in the back and back at it again. And they said, nope, you're trashed. You have only
Wow.
one option. And this is, again, another funny story, but you have to look at things. And humor is all you got sometimes. But when I first had the transplant, or we talked about a transplant, I was at the Mayo Clinic, and they said, well, if it doesn't go well, would you consider transplant? I said, oh, no, I don't want to be on pills for the rest of my life. Fast forward, my
Yeah, here
lungs
you are.
collapsed. I'm in an emergency room. They said, do you want a transplant? And I said, I'll have that transplant. So it sort of brought everything into sharp focus. And I've been, incredibly lucky with the best surgical team and the best people who have since become really good friends.
So that's amazing.
But it was like a string of miracles.
Mm. So, over your career, obviously you've met tons of people. There have been, guides and locals and strangers, and was there anybody who influenced you in the making of images that kind of, remained invisible in that process for you?
Well,
But
there
or
were
that you
several.
couldn't. Yeah.
I mean, first off, when I was a young photojournalist, I looked at the work of Larry Burroughs at Life magazine. I looked at Philip Hyde, and there was a guy in Chicago that worked for the Daily News named Gary Settle, two-time photographer of the year, who was just an incredible guy to compete against. And we've been really good friends for a long time, but he's amazingly talented. I've sort of been fortunate enough to like the Geographic people, many of which were my interns at one time or another. So there's that. But are you asking me, is there a style that I'm looking for? Or
No, I mean, I was just more about like those people that influenced you that were kind of, you know, behind the process or,
yeah,
like a guide that might have taken you somewhere that you didn't know even existed and,
yeah.
got an image that was, just
I
you
will
would have
say that
never known about or anything like that.
one time I was down in Mexico working on a book called Secret Forest, and I was traveling with Jeff Foote, another photographer, and I ran into this situation where we were trying to get somewhere in a hurry, and this campesino, a peasant, in this little grass shack, standing out there he had a wall of pinups from Playboy and stuff, and he had an ocelot pelt.
Mm.
So I saw this and I was like, oh boy, that's a picture. And I thought, well, I'm short on time. And I was ready to drive away from it. And Jeff said, go get that shot. So that's in the selection I sent you as well. It's like, it's like you learn that it was an endangered species that this guy killed. But for him, it was a thing eating his chickens.
Yeah.
So it's like, what's your values and, what's the message? But yeah, I mean, there's lots of people like that probably my wife the most, because she's a shrink.
Does she go with you a lot of times on?
Used to.
Yeah.
But I think the compassion and empathy part is definitely from her. A willingness to take a little bit more time to understand things from her. I can be very impulsive. So sometimes slowing down is the best thing you can do. Yeah.
I mean, you've mentored a ton of photographers, right, over the years. Is there a number one or a piece of advice that you would give to somebody who's trying to find their way and, in photography, or trying to find their own style in landscape?
I think I'd say forget about the style. I think when you're starting out, you borrow from everybody, and then you find out what fits, or if you're lucky. Some people just are out and out plagiarizers. That's all they'll ever be. But every now and then, I don't know, another example. Wish I could remember his name, but I was doing a workshop, and you didn't have never experienced one of my critique sessions, but there's sometimes we're legendary.
I've heard. I wish I did get to experience, actually.
I had a guy in a workshop that, I have a preconceived notion of what's a good photograph. And so his work came up, and they were black and whites, and they always had, the first one came up, and there was a person facing right and another one facing left on opposite sides. And I thought, why? What's your message here? What's going to capture the eye? And I was getting ready to, and then the next image comes up. And he had two other things, like he had this whole set of stylistic images that were schizophrenic, basically. And as we went through his images, it was genius. So it goes to show you that, if you're going to jump in with your own preconceived notion of, putting your values on his work, he was at a different level, on his own plane and his own mission. So who am I to say anything? I just said, it's great, really great stuff. So
he was trying to tell a story, right, through multiple images.
He just had a distinct style of bifurcated look at everything, and it was just, it was refreshing. And when you see something like that, it's like you're used to certain things. It's like, how many hot air balloons can you see? How many? Right. There's all these, again, visual cliches, but this was no cliche.
I've also heard people saying, like, don't worry about your style. Your style will come through when you're, 10 years from now, right? When we're looking at your photos, right?
Well, so what you're doing when you start off is you're borrowing techniques and not style. And then you can apply them to your own sense of your vision, whatever it is. But it's like it's like you sort of gag when you hear, after a while, somebody said, well, you have great leading lines, or, blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay, do you like the image? Does it speak to you? Does it tell a story? Is there a reason for it being there? I think everybody wants to run when they should be crawling. How's that?
That's a good point.
And I think you have to, for all the people you've talked to, you probably know that, but they're seasoned in their profession and they've paid their dues. A lot of hard knocks, a lot of refusals, a lot of disappointments, and but the overriding feeling that that I have, and both from photography and from the transplant, is joy. I mean, I'm an unlucky son of a bitch.
Yeah.
Like, how could you possibly, match that? It's just that you have to face life with gratitude. Not always easy, but
Is there a time when you were shooting and something went wrong in the field and that taught you a lasting lesson of something? I mean, obviously, going down the Colorado River and having that issue is a whole separate discussion.
Yeah, that's different.
But,
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, how recent you want to go? You want to go way back? Because
whatever.
One of the defining ones was I was given an assignment to go chase down some mafia hood, and I basically made all these photographs in low light and really hard, difficult things, standing on street corners and doing it with an investigative reporter from the Sun-Times. And we finally located the guy. It was just a flash on camera shot. And I shot it. Then I went back to Chicago, processed my film, and realized that this is back in the old days of Leicas, that I plugged the sync cord into the wrong sync outlet. So I had this little strip of exposure of this epic photograph. And I just thought, I pulled it out of the reels and out of the processing and threw it across the room, and banging against the wall, young and aggressive. And I went out to, come clean to the photo editor, and he said, "Oh, that was it."
You thought it was going to be much worse than that.
I was sure I was going to be either executed or fired.
Yeah.
And as you get older, you realize that, screw-ups are part of the process.
Yeah, you're not the only one.
It's how you learn.
Exactly.
I can tell you lots of times where, in modern day, where you didn't hit your front point on the right focus point on stack focusing. You get this great image, but it's out of focus. It's just hard to do.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, you can do it. But after a while, you sort of laugh at yourself. It just is.
Yeah. You've worked with major conservation initiatives, and in your experience, how much power can a single image have in changing a public perception or policy?
Well, one of the best examples we had was with the ILCP, the International League of Conservation Photographers. We did a thing called a rave. You probably know what that is.
Yeah, Justin talked a little bit about that to me as well.
So we had gone down to a place called Balandra, which is they were going to put a Club Med on the Gulf of California, and it would involve digging up all these great mangrove, one of the few mangrove coastal forests on that mainland side. So we went down there, or on the Gulf side, on the peninsula. So we had a team of an aerial photographer, an underwater photographer, a landscape photographer, and I think a wildlife photographer. And we went down there. Along with that, there was a woman who was the World Journal Tribune correspondent for Mexico. And when we just got down there, and the Mexican government found out that this shady deal that they were doing, this land swap, was exposed, and she asked them about it. They said, "Oh no," and they backed off totally.
Wow.
We never took a picture, but the fact that we were there and shining a light on things, and then her asking the pivotal question, really shows you how much you can expose things and just your presence. But there's been other raves that have really accomplished things in short order. Damming the rivers in Patagonia, for instance, or the cenotes in Mexico, where groundwater is being polluted by the hotels. So yeah, it's just it always amazes me, and sometimes it doesn't happen immediately. But it was kind of funny. The one in the dams in Chile and Argentina was the program is Sin Represas, no dams, and one of the members of the team was a videographer, and what we found out later was it wasn't our still photography that did make the difference. Everybody in the country, it was a very young country, was on videos on their iPhones. So the video we produced went bonkers, and they stopped the dams. So I mean, you just never know. You sort of do the work, put it out there, and sometimes it works.
And you see what happens.
Yeah. But there is power to images, viscerally.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, just even as a photojournalist, right?
Yeah.
I mean, just the photos that you're there taking of a particular story or what's going on has huge impact. Is there an image or a moment in your career that you feel represents like who you are as a photographer? I mean, you've shot so many images, so I'm sure that's a hard one.
I mean, devilishly handsome.
Yeah, is there a bird that relates to you being devilishly handsome?
I just I kind of look at things in clumps, I guess. But lately, I did this piece on burrowing owls for Geographic, and I did a story for the Geographic on the lands along the border, and then I did another one on Native American land stewardship. And I think I would say the last one I mentioned, the Native American land stewardship, I got to work with and around people who are conserving the earth from I don't want to say spiritual, but from a Native American perspective. So I think that was, for me, very meaningful personally, because I got to see that, like stuff in the Indian lore, talking about rivers as being the blood of the earth, and it just getting outside yourself and looking at a different perspective. And that's sort of like a gift. And to be able to work with these guys was really wonderful. And the sense of humor, for instance.
That's
wonderful.
Interesting.
But so I can't think of. I don't think there is a single image. I mean, I think the old cliche is the next one.
Yeah.
I'm still pretty hungry and eager to get out again. I mean, wait for the weather.
This past February, your image archive was presented, right, to the University of Arizona's Center for Creative Photography,
right,
which is an amazing honor. I'm gonna ask what made the cut and why, but I know from talking to like David Munch and him getting his stuff together for that, that's a tough task to get all your images together and pick which ones, right, are going to be the ones that.
Well, mine is the entire archive. So
it is okay.
It's they took all of my film, and it's sort of interesting because they're not up to speed with digital yet, and it's I keep hammering this through them because in a way that my career has been a sort of like it's like a narrative on photography of going from black and white 35 millimeter 4x5 and then color and digital and to present day. And so not many people have made all those transitions. So I saw that as a value. I hope they do, but I hope they use it as a teaching tool for future generations about what was and what it could be. But I think you just don't know what they. I'll give you this example. I told somebody that it's really taking forever to get this done, and I said it's taken me a couple of years or something like that. And they said, "Oh, that's fast."
Right.
It's scholarship. So until they get like a grad student to go through things, and particularly I'd like them to to get the backup drives on the Lightroom catalog, because that's like 50,000 images.
Wow. Yeah.
What they've got is like 3,000 or 4,000, but they're Chromes. So I already I weeded out quite a bit.
And that's a fun process, I'm sure, over, like you said, over many years.
Well, yeah, that's the work of the business. I've always considered myself a shooter, Grudgingly, I'm accepting the fact that if you spend one day in the field, you spend 4 days in the office, just getting it all captioned, checking all your spellings and crossing the T's and dotting the I's. But it's it's a discipline again. And again, it goes back to journalism.
Do you have somebody who works with you on
Yeah,
your images and
I
stuff?
used
Or
to.
you're doing it
I used
all?
to.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm just a humble button pusher from Chicago with a good hard drive.
Yeah.
Yeah, you must have a lot of storage space on yours.
I do. I just actually got a new Synology. I think it's 46 terabytes of data.
Yeah, I'm sitting at about 40. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not filled up yet or anything, but yeah, I'm planning for the future.
Well, I've got to look at that at some point. I'm still using G drives.
Yeah.
Some of them are not supported anymore.
Oh, really? Wow. Okay.
But I have a giant cheese grater Mac with a Pegasus inside, so it's pretty robust.
Yeah, fast. You just had and you had mentioned it, a 16-page feature article on National Geographic, right, on the burrowing owls. And
Right.
what led to this? And this is just years in the making.
Yeah, it was several years, but I basically sent stock images to Kurt Mutchler, who is the photo editor there. And they've had revolving chairs on photo directors and photo editors. And Kurt's one of the guys that I knew for a while back. And whenever I had an idea or I had some stock images, I would just pitch him. And he liked the idea, and he did the research, and they hadn't done it once. So when I finished making the submission, he suggested I go back and document the current efforts to relocate owls from areas that are under construction for housing, which gave it a more timely environmental impact angle to it.
Do they team you up?
But I did it.
Do they team you up with a writer as well?
Yeah, well, with the Geographic, it's sort of different. Yeah. Usually, the photography drives everything, but again, that also is changing since Disney took over. So it's I'd say they're in a state of flux still. I'm not sure exactly, what's going on, but my editor retired in the process, and maybe I drove him into it.
I doubt that.
Yeah.
What do you hope people will remember about your work 50 years from now?
I don't know. You told the truth. I think if you care, you tell the truth, and you document things honestly, you're doing a good job. It's not really that complicated. You could get flowery about talking about the art of it and everything, but as I said, the art is not something this generation will decide.
Well, with that, we're coming to an end. I have one last question, and that is, it might be a difficult one, but if you had to sum up your career in a few words, or you can make it a couple sentences, what would they be and why?
You silver-tongued devil. I don't know. It's incredibly hard. How do you sum up a life? I think the most salient point would be fortunate. I've had a very fortunate life. I've been put in lucky situations. And it's been a real gift to be in the places I've been to. You just got to show up for work.
Yeah. F8 and B there?
Well, in Chicago it was F11. We weren't at the field.
Yeah. There's so many different places I want to go, Jack, and
Right. No.
like you, it's I mean, I got to plan out the next however many years, right?
Well, I wish
For
that I
me.
could go back to the places I've flown to in the past, but I just can't fly anymore. It's just
Yeah.
not in the cards. But certainly Namibia, hard to beat that one.
Yeah, I'm going to Zambia actually in middle of October through almost middle of November.
Justin or
Huh?
with Justin?
No, I'm going with my uncle. He goes quite often, or has been going quite often, to Africa and doing private safaris,
Mhm.
just with a guide. So I'm excited to go do that. I've never been to Africa. I've never been to that continent,
Are you kidding?
and
Yeah.
so we're doing like I don't know, 12 or so days of safari, and then going to Victoria Falls. So check that out.
When I first was, they wanted me to go. I didn't think I went there first with Joe Van Os, and my friends would say, you got to go over there. And I just said, oh, come on, I've seen all these movies. It's all, I've been there and seeing all these wildlife films and everything. And they said, no, you got to go there. So I got there, and like day one, we got into the Land Rovers, drove to the top of this hill, and there was like a sea of wildebeest and zebra running around us like Custer, and we were the Indians. We were Custer, they were the Indians. But it was like, you just sit there and your jaw drops. And especially if you go there for the migration, which I assume you probably.
I don't know if it'll be migration time. I don't know if it's like right in the edge of what would be their spring to summer, I think is when I'm going.
Well, there's
So
been
I don't
some
know.
really,
Maybe.
again, tragic things going on. The amount of tours that are, they basically are like Pride of Lions being ringed with about 20 cars, Land Rovers.
Yeah, I've
And
seen some videos of that.
It's out of hand.
Yeah, because they're all on walkie-talkies, right? And they're telling the other
Exactly.
guides, like, "Hey, over here, we've got a, whatever."
Well, that's what you were talking about. I mean, there was a scene where we were pulling up. There was like 4 other cars there. A cheetah was there and trying to, address a kill. And I said, we're out of here. And we just drove off. And I asked everybody in the truck, and they just agreed to. It was like, there is something where you feel like a warrior at some point. That was one of them.
The chase is good, but the meal is not.
I guess that's one of them.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you very
much. It'd be
much.
nice to cross paths if you do any kind of a southwestern trip with the young bucks.
Well, Jack, I can't thank you enough for being on this podcast today.
Well, I'm anxious to see what you
with
come
me
up
and
with.
telling your story. I really, really appreciate it. And I hope everybody enjoys listening to your story and this podcast. So, but thank you.
Well, keep me posted what your travel plans are.